What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel.
Members of the Rob Corps. Oh my god. Captain America: The Oath is probably the best Captain America story ever told. I say that from experience. It's not like, yeah, I really like this story. I never read any others, but I really like this story, so it's the best. No. I've been reading Captain America for a long time, so I think I'm pretty qualified to make that statement. I love Hydra Steve Rogers, and it's like mind-blowing. Now, there are a couple things that I want to address before we start this video. I was going through the comments of the last video, and there were a couple questions that people were asking, that a lot of people were asking. The first one is, how is it that the Red Skull has the brain of Charles Xavier? And the second one is it Steve Rogers' memories that are altered, or is it reality that's altered? Okay, when it comes to the brain of the Red Skull, following the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, when Cyclops killed Charles Xavier, somewhere along the line, Red Skull had taken the brain of Charles Xavier and used it to give himself telekinesis. He has the brain of Charles Xavier in his mind. Now, I'm sure there's a story that covers that. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's a story that goes through all that. But that's how it has it. It was a plot thread that was never wrapped up. So going into Secret Wars, coming out of Secret Wars, and going into all new, all different Marvel, the Red Skull still has the brain of Charles Xavier. That was the whole basis of like the Axis event. You know, when you had a Scarlet Witch and you had Doctor Strange that cast a spell in order to basically turn Red Skull into a good guy, it had the effect of doing that, but it's in a shockwave through everybody else, and it made good guys bad guys, and it made bad guys good guys. And so that's where we got the cool Carnage story where he was like a hero. You know, that's where we got like Superior Iron Man, different things like that. But with regards to Steve Rogers himself, it's reality that was altered. Now, Nick Spencer said, yes, reality is altered, but it's also this idea that if the Red Skull just wanted to alter the memories of Steve Rogers, well, he could have just kidnapped him, used his telepathy, and just altered the memories of Steve Rogers. Using a cosmic cube to alter reality basically means that it'll never wear off, it'll never change unless somebody uses the cosmic cube to go back and to change it back. If he altered the memories of Steve Rogers using his telepathy, then if Red Skull were to die, if Red Skull were to lose his powers, then Steve Rogers' memories could revert back, or another telepath could come along and set Steve Rogers' memories back to the way they're supposed to be. By altering reality, things are fixed, they're set in stone. Until somebody comes back with a cosmic cube and changes everything back, we're gonna be with Hydra Captain America. Now, I'm sure regular Captain America will come back somewhere along the line. I hope it's a while from now, because this is some of the best Captain America storytelling there's ever been. But until that time comes, it's gonna be one hell of a ride. So hopefully that answers the question for you guys. If you guys have more questions, feel free to post them down in the comment section, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. But this whole idea, this whole comic of The Oath is like a throwback to The Confession. And what I mean by that is, if you ever hear someone say the death of Captain America was part of Civil War, it was, but it wasn't. Technically speaking, it was not. Chronologically, it kind of was. And the reason why is because you had, of course, the main Civil War event. Then you had the fallout of Civil War, which was the Initiative. It was a superhero team in all 50 states. The 50-state Initiative, as it was referred to, it was a line of comics that went into the death of Captain America. The reason why people say the death of Captain America is part of Civil War, though, is because of the fact that there was a story called The Confession, and the Civil War banner was slapped on the front of it. And so people looked at that and they said, okay, well then I guess that means everything from the start of Civil War up to this story is all part of the Civil War line of stories. It's all part of the Civil War event. That's where people got that from. But the fact remains that The Confession, as it was originally done, was like an emotional roller coaster. It was beautifully written. It was Tony Stark talking to the corpse of Steve Rogers and basically crying and apologizing the whole time. It was him saying, I knew this war was coming. I knew it was only a matter of time before the superheroes were going to fight each other. And I knew that we were going to be at opposite ends. I knew that we were going to be on the other side. You were going to be fighting for freedom. I was going to be fighting for security. We would bump heads time after time. But he says, if I'd known it was going to end with the death of Captain America, Tony Stark never would have gone through with it. He would have found some other resolution. He would have found some way in order to ensure that, the government wouldn't overreach its bounds in response to increasing conflict between superheroes and supervillains. And instead, he would have found a more reasonable compromise. Now, Nick Spencer does not do that. Nick Spencer gives us Captain America at his most evil, because that's the funny thing, is people are like, well, I don't really think Steve Rogers is an evil guy so much as Steve Rogers believes he's doing the right thing. No. He's evil. He's evil as hell. And it's so cool. It's so cool. This is why I love this version of Captain America. So the first thing we do is we pick up on the SHIELD helicarrier Iliad, because remember, during the trial of Maria Hill, she was basically ousted as SHIELD's director. Now, this was Nick Spencer giving her like the Nick Fury treatment, right? I mean, that was the way it was in Marvel Comics. Like things would pop off. Nick Fury would be like, well, I have to go figure out what's going on. And so he would just take off, go to some bunker underground, you know, and he would try to find a way to defeat the threat. That's what he was doing during the events of Secret Invasion. Chronologically, he was the first one to realize that Skrulls were taking over the Earth, but he was trying to figure out a way to solve it on his own without invoking all the different superheroes, because he didn't know who was a Skrull and who wasn't. It was the same way with Age of Ultron. He was in a bunker underground trying to figure out a way to survive this whole crisis with Ultron killing off all the superheroes, hoping they would eventually find him and he could rally them together and then take out Ultron wherever it is that Ultron was at. It's always that way with Nick Fury. But with Maria Hill, we don't really know what all is going to go on with her. All we know is that SHIELD was basically working on this shield, this force field that would encase the Earth and prevent anybody from being able to get in. It would prevent extraterrestrial threats from getting in, but it would prevent, people from Earth from getting out unless they had permission. Maria Hill took those plans and dropped them off with Carol Danvers, stole a whole bunch of intelligence from SHIELD, and then just rode off into the sunset. And so we don't really know what she's doing right now. We just know that she's going the route of Nick Fury. But with regards to Steve Rogers being here, of course, he's talking to one of the SHIELD agents. This guy is not significant, but he's wildly important at the same time. And the reason why I say that is because he's not a person of note. It's not like he's Phil Coulson or anything like that. He's just a random SHIELD agent. But prior to this, Steve Rogers had made a speech, and we'll get to that speech here in a second, when he accepted the position of being SHIELD's director. But he had made a speech, and what this guy says, what this SHIELD agent says, is like the hope was palpable, that people really felt like things were going to change. They felt like things were going to get better, because it felt like things were just getting increasingly worse. They were just getting worse and worse and worse. And they're all looking at Captain America as the guy that's going to right the ship again. He's going to set the country itself back on the path of making it great again. Dare I offer that sentiment. But unlike the original Confession story, which had Iron Man sitting down at the coffin of Steve Rogers and saying, "I'm so sorry," as his first words, Steve Rogers says, "What a waste." And that's why it's so crazy, because it's just like, damn, like right off the bat, Nick Spencer's like, yep, that's what's going on right now. Now, the cool thing about this is almost entirely like dialogue. There's very little action in here. There's very little conflict in here. Instead, it's just Steve Rogers talking to the corpse, so to speak, of Tony Stark. But one of the first things he does is he starts talking about truths, the truth of the situation. One of the first things he says is he knows that Tony Stark will come back from this. He knows that Tony Stark will come back, if for no other reason than Tony Stark is so narcissistic that he refuses to die. That whenever things don't go his way, he basically rewrites the rules. Now, this is kind of Nick Spencer, looking at like the people, right? And saying, well, the people are fine with an outcome. They're fine with the rules of the game, so long as the rules mean that they won. If they win, well, then the rules are fine. If they lose, well, the rules need to be changed. And it happens on both sides. It's just the contradictory nature of people. That's what he's doing with Tony Stark. He's like, you want to change the rules when you lose, but the rules are fine when you win. Not only that, he says, for Tony Stark, though the biggest betrayal, like anybody else, is knowing that the person that sent him here was basically a friend. Carol Danvers beating him to the point that he's on the verge of death, and the only option he had was to put his body in suspended animation and turn his mind into an AI that would interact with Riri Williams and teach her how to be Iron Man. One of the other things he says here is that in terms of the truths about Steve Rogers, he says, look, I'm not the man that you think I am. I'm not the Captain America that you've known. If you thought I was, then let me correct that misunderstanding. Let me correct that problem. The other thing he says here is that he always knew that this was going to happen to Tony Stark. He always knew it was going to happen to all the superheroes. And that's what makes it so great about this. He says, humanity is Daedalus. All of you superheroes are Icarus. You were given wax wings. You were told, just go out and glide, but don't fly too close to the sun. And in their hubris, and their arrogance, they did exactly what they were told not to do. They put on those wax wings, they flew too close to the sun, the wax melted, they came crashing down to reality and drowned in the waters of their own hubris, drowned in the waters of their own arrogance. Their actions led them here. And when they had reached out to humanity for a helping hand, when they had reached out to the people for a hand and said, help us, get us out of here, humanity was nowhere to be found. Why? Because Tony Stark and the world's superheroes had betrayed humanity. Now, the other cool thing about this, and of course Steve Rogers will talk about this as he goes on, basically saying, hey, look, here's where things stand. He starts talking about like the nature of people in the sense that when it comes to the superhero community, they were appointed there. The only reason why Tony Stark's allowed to be a hero is because humanity says it's okay. We know that from the first Civil War. Yeah, it was one thing for Tony Stark to say, we need to implement superhuman registration. It was another for Congress to pass the Superhuman Registration Act. Congress only passed it because the people were asking for it. And the people were asking for it because they were tired of superheroes taking the law into their own hands and just saying, we'll be damned with collateral damage. We'll just do what we want to. Who cares about the nameless, faceless individuals who die in the name of keeping the world safe? It was superheroes who were being perceived as vigilantes. And Steve Rogers says, that's how humanity viewed you. That's why when you were drowning in the waters of your hubris, nobody came to help you out because humanity looked down on you and said, well, it was the direction you were going. You got what you deserved. Now, the other thing he says is that humanity looked for something better. They looked for someone to actually rescue them. They were looking for someone to come along and to say, I will make life better for you. And this is when we get to the speech of Steve Rogers, because he says, on the front of assuring humanity that I will be their savior, it's been a very good day. With his inauguration as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., there's a lot of people who are looking at what's going on, because keep in mind, Congress had basically passed the S.H.I.E.L.D. Act, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. Act basically grants absolute power to the person who is in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, it doesn't make them a dictator. It makes them dictator in times of national emergency. But what it does do, when there isn't a national emergency, is it basically takes the person who's director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and it gives them absolute control over police. It gives them absolute control over surveillance, over all those different things that are designed to make sure that the country is safe. Now, the crazy thing about this is that Nick Spencer is drawing a direct, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys this, but he's drawing a direct allegory between the position of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s director and Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler wasn't, he didn't become a dictator overnight. It's not like he and the browncoats rolled into the government in Germany and said, well, this is ours now. They didn't just go into Germany and just set up shop and say, now we're running the show. It was a staged build. It was convincing the German people that the Nazi party had their best interests at heart. It was convincing the German people that the Weimar Republic, the ruling government of Germany at the time, was inept, that they were the reason why Germany had fallen into economic stagnation. They were the reason why Article 231 of the Treaty of Versailles, the war guilt clause, was why they had all come crashing down, why they had lost all the territory that gave them all their mining resources, why their economy was in the gutter, why people from foreign countries were coming in and buying everything up. It was the Nazis convincing the German people, we will save you. All you have to do is make sure that we're able to run the show. Adolf Hitler was appointed to the position of chancellor, where it gave him absolute control over virtually everything he would need to take over the country. He set up a couple of incidents, fires of the Reichstag, so on and so forth, secured his position as dictator, and took over Germany. That's what Nick Spencer is pointing to with this position of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's saying, look, all it's going to take is some national emergency. All it's going to take is some major situation. Now, the crazy thing about this is that if it was anybody else, the president would be like, look, I don't know if I'm comfortable with giving them absolute power over S.H.I.E.L.D., but it's Captain America. And that's what almost everyone says. There's a couple individuals who stand out. There's a national security expert, for example, a guy named James Green, who says, look, we can't have this much power in the hands of one person. But even he says, well, but also it's Captain America. Of course, Captain America won't abuse his power, but if he's removed or if he leaves that position and someone else goes in, well, maybe they will. You've got, again, this political pundit, Harry Hauser, the guy that we've seen from the Sam Wilson Captain America comics, who says, well, look, we need Captain America in this position. We need to make sure the right kind of people are the ones who are allowed to make good decisions. We need to make sure the right kind of people are the kind who can enter our planet, different things like that. You've got Sam Wilson who says, I fought alongside Steve Rogers for years and years and years and years. If there's anyone I trust to hold this position, it's him. Steve Rogers is in the perfect position to take over the world. And all it would take is just for something to happen. It would take an invasion. It would take something to pop off. And then suddenly the world's just ready to hand its control over to Captain America because he's Captain America. He's a good guy. He's the center of the superhero community. If there's anyone we can trust, it's Captain America. And that's why it works so well. That's why it's so beautifully done. Now, with regards to this speech, he says, look, we're in danger from everywhere. We're in danger from all over the place. We have people outside the world. We have races outside the world that want to invade us, that want to attack us. Maybe because we pissed them off at some point along the line. Maybe it's because in their hubris, the superheroes of the world decided they wanted to race off to the other side of space and attack people. Maybe it's because of the fact that they just are They're a warring race of aliens and they just want to conquer Earth. But he also says we have threats here inside the Earth. We've got threats from organizations, Hydra, Advanced Idea Mechanics, The Hand. We've got threats from the Red Skull. We've got threats from Helmet or Helmuseum, however you want to pronounce it. We've got threats from all these different people. What we need to do is we need to show solidarity. Now that's why this works, because this is the public face of Steve Rogers. This is the show that Steve Rogers has been putting on ever since he became Captain America. This is the face he puts on for the world. This is the mask he wears so that people will believe him when he says things like, I recognize this is an insane amount of trust that you're putting in my hands. I recognize that if this was anybody else, you would be terrified. But rest assured, I am Captain America. If there's anyone you can trust with your safety and security, it's me, because I will stay in this position just long enough to make sure that we right this ship, that we're on the right track, that things get back to the way they used to be. But I will not stay in this position so long that I become corrupted by it. If there's even an inkling that that's the case, I will walk away and I will persuade the leaders of the world to rescind the SHIELD Act and to basically have the SHIELD director position go back to the way it used to be, where they're more of an advisor to the leaders of the world, as opposed to an equal or an overseer of sorts. The other half of this is he says, we as a people need to show solidarity. We need to come together. We need to come together and we need to say, look, yes, we face threats, but we fight these threats together. We fight these threats unified, not as individuals. You guys see the beauty of this, right? You see the beauty of this. On the front face, it's Steve Rogers uniting the world, not uniting a country, uniting the world under a single ideology, while in the background, working to conquer the world. What better way to seize absolute power than to convince those people that you're trying to conquer that you're the one person they can trust? And not just through words, through actions. Fighting on behalf of the world, being a rallying point for the superhero community. You guys see how beautiful this comes together, right? I mean, it's incredible that it all works that way. We jump back again to Steve Rogers continuing to talk to the corpse of Tony Stark. And what he basically says is he's talking about Carol Danvers, and he says, look, I don't think Carol Danvers would ever admit it to herself. He says, but I think the reason why she fought Civil War, why she fought against you during the Second Civil War, was because she didn't want to admit that she wasn't as good as you. Because Steve Rogers harkens back to the legacy of Carol Danvers. That's always been the way her character was written by everyone ever. That she's like the superhero that no one ever thinks of. The superhero that no one ever really considers. Even then, he references the events of House of M. He says, remember when the Scarlet Witch warped reality and gave us all our heart's desire? She took the mind of Charles Xavier, she read his mind, she changed reality, and everybody got what it is that they wanted. Magneto led mutant kind as they ruled over humanity. And Carol Danvers was the most popular superhero in the world, adored by everyone. Oh, it's Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers, she's so amazing. She couldn't bear to not have that. She couldn't bear to be relegated back to the position that nobody cared about. And it was like her life was going that way. Instead of being a superhero fighting the good fight on the planet Earth, she was confined to a satellite, working for SWORD, the Sentient World Observation and Response Department. She lived on a satellite and she just looked at other worlds out there and said, yep, just waiting until somebody decides to attack us. That was her job. She was becoming more irrelevant by the day. And Steve Rogers says that seemed to be her greatest fear. That seemed to be her greatest concern, is that she was becoming more and more irrelevant. But more so than that, when he talks to Tony Stark, he basically says, it's too late for all of you. This was the ultimate failure of the superhero community. And he references past events. He says, for example, when Cyclops first got his powers, this sort of birth, this resurgence of the mutant population during the early days of the X-Men, when Xavier first went around and started recruiting all these different X-Men, and Cyclops was the first of that team. He says when Cyclops' powers first emerged, people were terrified, but then they got angry when people like Tony Stark responded and said, well, you're just being stupid for being so scared of that. You just don't understand. And no, they fear for their children's lives. And you're telling a person who fears for their child's life that they're stupid for fearing for their child's life. When the secret invasion event happened, when someone swore fealty to an alien race that was bent on conquering the Earth after having fought in, a war against another alien race for millions of years, you told them they were stupid for being afraid of that, for not knowing if the person next to them was a human neighbor or a Skrull replicant. But what he also says is the reason why Tony Stark and the superhero community took that stance was because they don't see themselves as part of humanity. Tony Stark doesn't see himself as an average person. Even removing his extravagant wealth, his extreme intelligence, Tony Stark could jump in an Iron Man suit and just fly. He can just fly out of the planet Earth and fly to the other side of the galaxy. He can just go hang out on a planet that no one will ever see or no one will ever chart, outside of whatever superheroes manage to get there. He can go be part of the Guardians of the galaxy and he can take his time to clear his mind. But the single father with 3 kids working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet doesn't have that luxury. The single mother with 3 kids and 2 jobs trying to make ends meet doesn't have that luxury. They can't jump into an Iron Man suit and just fly away and just clear their mind. They have to make do. They have to just do the best they can. The student who's up to their eyeballs in debt has to do the best they can. But the superheroes never took that into account. The superheroes were just like, well, things are tough, so let's just go race off. Let's just go clear our minds. Or let's just fight one another. They never took the time to sit down and say that they're displacing families when they're tearing buildings apart. They're forcing families to lose members of their own families, whether it's through casualties or otherwise, when buildings come crashing down in their conflicts. They never stopped and they never think about that. And throughout all these fights, all these civil wars, all these skirmishes between superheroes and supervillains, that humanity has become more and more upset. And Captain America says that was the real arrogance. That was the real arrogance, to believe that humanity would put up with it forever. Not only that, he goes back to the first truth that he said when he says, I'm not the man that you believed I was. You know, he says during the first Civil War event, during every conflict when we've ever fought, during every instance when we've ever spent time together, you know, especially during the first Civil War, when you defeated me, it was because I allowed it. If you lived to see the dawn, it was because I allowed it. You defeated me because I let you think you could beat me. When he went off against Spider-Man, when Spider-Man and I fought during the first Civil War, I went easy on him. I could have killed Spider-Man. If you guys go back and watch that battle, Spider-Man's like, yeah, I mean, Captain America got the better of me because he's just better at fighting than Spider-Man is. He's more well-adjusted. He knows how to counter Spider-Man's moves. He knows how to predict what people are going to do. He says, look, every single person that I've ever fought against, I could have killed them if I wanted to, but I didn't. Because if I had killed you, it would have put my plans in jeopardy. It would have caused problems. But it's him saying, the fact that you lived this long was because I allowed you to. And so he basically finishes this out. He says, look, you know, I'm not angry with you being the way you are because that's just how you are. That's just who you are as a person. But he says, I wish you were not in a state of suspended animation, Tony Stark. I wish you were not in a state of suspended animation. Why? Because I wish you were here, Tony Stark. I wish you were here so you could see what happens when I destroy everything you've built. I wish you were here so I could see the look on your face when all the superheroes are dead, when the government institutions that you claim to have fought for come crashing down, when everything that you know and love is gone. I wish you were here so you could see what it looks like when Hydra conquers the world. And he says, the way I know this is going to happen is because during Civil War II, when Ulysses sent out that huge shockwave, you know, where he showed everybody the vision of the future, and you had Miles Morales holding the corpse of Steve Rogers, you and Carol Danvers and everybody who was there was so fixed on Miles Morales. They were so fixed on Miles Morales holding the corpse of Steve Rogers, they didn't take the time to look. And he says, that's your failing as a superhero community. You don't look at the bigger picture. He says, while you were looking at me, I was looking at everything else. And what I saw was the perfect world. I saw a world where Hydra ruled everything. I saw a world where humanity's perception, where the people in the United States were controlled through media. They believed what I wanted them to believe because the news told them so, and where else are they going to get their information? I saw a world with security checkpoints where only the right kind of people were allowed in. I saw a world where kids were taught from a young age to follow Hydra's ideologies. I saw a world where undesirables were held in containment until they could be dealt with accordingly. I saw a world of mass surveillance. I saw the perfect Hydra world. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Oh my God, dude, The Oath is so good. It's the best Captain America story there's ever been. God, I absolutely love it. But yeah, this sets the stage for Secret Empire. This is basically the prelude to Secret Empire, and I am hyped to see what happens next. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.